I'm Nathan Ponchard, this is Chasing Cars, and we're about to have our first Australian drive of the all-new rear-wheel drive, frameless doored, Chinese-made, 4th generation, all-electric Mazda 6e.
Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car.
Brought to you by
Now, this car is meant to launch in Australia in the second quarter of 2026, but we don't have very many details about it yet. We do know that it's meant to start at under $55,000 before on-road costs. We can estimate that there'll be perhaps 2, maybe 3 variants, and that this one here, 19-inch wheels, dual pane sunroof, Alcantara interior, and such, will be the top spec model, and that it may be called a Tenza. Now, it is a joint venture with Changan Automotive in China, and it does share its platform and its hard points with the Deepal S07. However, this is a completely different styling effort, a completely retuned car underneath, done by Mazda Motor in Europe, and so we're here to find out, has this successfully shed all of the over lightness and lack of feel that Chinese EVs seem to be known for these days? And does this have any Mazda DNA in its dynamics? It does look quite a lot like a Mazda from the outside, but it's more about the details, I think, than the actual shape. It isn't as svelte, I don't think, as some other Mazdas, certainly not as much as the previous generation Mazda 6. We're talking about a car here that is 50 millimeters wider than before, 56 millimeters longer than before, and crucially, 41 millimeters taller than the previous Mazda 6 sedan. And you can see that in the stance of this car, but it is on a rather long 2900 millimeter wheelbase. So this is a big sedan that's going to come in at a pretty decent price for a rear-wheel drive EV. It will be bang on Tesla Model 3 competition. So this is my first drive on a closed road. We're at Holden's old Lang Lang Proving Ground in a left-hand drive European spec Mazda 6e, the 4th generation Mazda 6, now all electric. So let's see what it can do. I'm in comfort mode and I'm going to flatten it because we're in a rear-wheel drive Mazda with an electric motor. This is the European spec car. It has 180 kilowatts, an 80 kilowatt hour NMC battery. The Australian one will have a 78 kilowatt hour lithium iron phosphate battery and 190 kilowatts. So slightly more performance and maybe a slightly different feel to the European car. Now, there are 3 drive mode settings in this Mazda 6e. We are in comfortable, which means the steering is very light, but has a degree of build-up. If we stick to this left lane here and we go through these corners, the steering is very sharp, 2.5 turns lock to lock as well, but not overly sharp, just nice and precise in a very Mazda DNA kind of way. What it doesn't have in comfortable is that the faster that you go, it doesn't really load up. It sort of does when you're going into corners, but it just doesn't feel firm enough in my opinion. The 2 other options are Sport and Custom, which we have on this screen here that's facing the center rear passenger, not really the driver, but you can see what it's got. If I go into Sport, it puts the regenerative braking on moderate, but if I go into Custom, you can have the coasting recovery strength on strong. And now the strongest thing about that is the name strong, because it's not really that strong. If I back off now, it eases down 115, 100, 90. This is not one pedal braking. And so that's the hardest it can do. What we're ascertaining here though is the way the Mazda 6e drives. This car has had a lot of tuning done by Mazda Motor Europe, to the electric power steering tune, to the springs and dampers, to the rear axle subframe, its rear-wheel drive, of course, and to the electronics, the calibration of the throttle, of the braking, of the stability control. But underneath this car is a Deepal S07. It is a shared platform with Changan Automotive from China. It is made in China. And so this wasn't a start from scratch job here for Mazda. This was here's a platform and the associated hard points and various bits and pieces that go with that. And what can you do? So there's been a lot of finessing done to this to try and make it drive like a Mazda, because when you look at it on paper, we are in a 2-ton Chinese electric rear-wheel drive Mazda 6. And a lot of those things I just said in that statement are quite odd. Now, Lang Lang is great because it has a lot of off-camber stuff. We have tram tracks further up here. We have bumps through corners. There's so much to test it. And custom here on these dampers, it really is nicely composed. It does feel a little bit of its weight sometimes. As we go into this corner here, it's tightening. It'll rock around a bit, but it moves its tail out a little bit with a nice little bit of adjustment. There's the tram tracks turning in here. It just really comfortably handles change of direction, probably more than you would expect of a 2-ton car with the DNA that this 6E has. So I think for the most part, they've actually done a pretty good job of retuning this car. The damping feels pretty good, perhaps not as overly firm as it could be, but at the same time, it needs to have a decent ride. So kangaroo, and another one. So we better hurry up and finish. It's not quite as firm as it probably could be, but it needs to combine everything that it does with a decent ride, and it has 19-inch wheels. So the combination of that, I think, for Australia is actually pretty good. These are the famous yumps at the proving ground here, sort of comfortably going over those. We've got a bit of reverberation up here, and let's see how it goes over the vibration. The body feels tight. There isn't really any drumming. The only refinement thing going on here is that I can hear a little bit of wind from the frameless driver's window here, because it is an extremely windy day here and it gets very windy at Lang Lang. So we do have that. As for the rest of it though, it's probably better to drive than I thought it was going to be. I wish it had more regenerative braking. Even going to this corner, like it would just help the dynamics more. But for the most part, it's surprisingly drivable. It's just the steering and comfortable. It is very light. I just can't imagine what it was like before it was tuned, because it just doesn't quite have the meat that you want, whereas custom and sport absolutely do. But this isn't a holistic, from the beginning, Graham strategy MX-5 style car. This is an EV sedan, and Mazda's done whatever they can to make the most of what they've been presented with. And I think on first inspection, it's actually pretty good. The quality's lovely, the refinement's good, the road noise isn't too excessive, and we're on really coarse chip here. The road noise isn't too excessive. Change of direction is surprisingly good, although we're not talking anything like Porsche Taycan levels of agility here. We're talking about making a 2-ton sedan move around and be a lot more dynamic than what it was to begin with. Being presented with a bespoke EV platform for a company like Mazda, who is going it alone these days, is, I suppose, a privilege for them, because it gives them an opportunity to have a proper EV. Other than the MX-30 electric that had 200 kilometers of range, this Mazda 6e rear drive sedan here is the first real EV that they've done. It's meant to have over 500 kilometers of WLTP range. It's meant to start at under $55,000 before on-road costs in Australia. And I think, based on what we've experienced here at Lang Lang, it's actually pretty good. It has a degree of character. And compared to the general consensus of Chinese EVs, is they have no character, like absolutely zero. You could count on one hand the amount of Chinese EVs that have some kind of personality, and this Mazda 6e definitely has that. Sure, it doesn't have the steering weighting that I think it should have for Mazda's DNA when in the comfortable option. It doesn't really have much in the way of regenerative braking, and we can't really assess it here because this isn't an Australian spec car, but it doesn't really have a whole lot of performance either. From a standing start up until 60, maybe 80 kilometers an hour, it's okay. It'll do, I reckon, somewhere sort of 8-ish seconds, I suspect, in the car that we get in Australia. But the acceleration above 100 kilometers an hour isn't great. It's pretty gradual. And I think that there may be a few moments in country road overtaking where it feels like the Mazda 6e may be much better off with a lot more grunt. But that said, this car is the European spec car. It is not our car. And so hopefully the version we get with a bit more power and a different battery ends up being a little bit punchier than what we have here. But for the most part, I think the 6e is actually a little bit better than I was expecting. We already knew that the interior was quite nice. I now know that the steering wheel to hold, the driving position, the way that you sit in it, the vision out of it, all that sort of stuff is all actually really pretty good. It does have a degree of personality, and for a Mazda, that means a lot. Of course, there will be the opportunity to finesse things like the steering weight and the braking over time, and I think some of those things might even be able to be done with over-the-air updates. But for now, I think this is going to be a pretty decent first proper EV for Mazda. So let us know what you think in the comments of the Mazda 6e. Do you like the shape of it? Do you like the details of it? Do you like the idea of a rear-wheel drive electric Mazda? Do you own an MX-30 electric and love your Mazda EV and would like a second one? Let us know what you think about chasing cars as well. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so below the video, hit the notification bell, and thanks heaps for watching.